Greetings, everyone. It is a humid morning here in southeast Georgia. I'm doing pretty well. I actually woke up early enough to get on my workout game. So I'm feeling it a little bit in my upper body. So hopefully I keep that up, unlike the past 2 days before that where I just slept in. Not necessary. I saw the headline that the Senate passed the rescissions bill to defund NPR, PBS, and aid organizations. I needed to look into that a little bit. Just didn't have time while I was getting ready for work this morning. But if it is what I think it is, and they didn't do a lot of amendments to it, this is going to hurt people who listen to smaller or rural radio stations, including probably the one that I listen to, because mine is it's a newer station and it's not in a big metro area. It's going to hurt the great programming we have on PBS. That's meant for kids and adult learners, and the news that they do on PBS. And then most of all, it's gonna hurt people all around the world, like children that are in dire straits, famine-prone areas, kids who were born with HIV/AIDS, like things like that. So you need to look up into it, see what they did and didn't amend out of or into the bill. But it's not a good thing. But they should be starting the marketplace morning report here in a second, so let's jump into it.
For an excuse to fire Powell. An excuse would be costly renovations at the Fed's D.C. headquarters. The Fed is supposed to respond to a letter from the White House's Office of Management and Budget questioning these renovations. Trump says he's discussed the idea of firing Powell, but says it's highly unlikely. Marketplace's Nancy Marshall-Genzer has more.
The letter gives Powell until July 21st to respond to a series of questions about cost overruns in the nearly $2.5 billion renovation. The Fed says the buildings in question haven't been renovated since the 1930s. Former Fed historian Gary Richardson can attest to that.
The bathrooms down in the basement near the library are really kind of scary.
Richardson says the water in the sinks was scalding, and the buildings were not very accessible for people with limited mobility. The Fed blames the higher price tag on asbestos and contaminated soil removal and says the water table is higher than expected. Former Fed attorney Cornelius Hurley is among the central bank watchers who think the renovation is a pretext to fire Powell.
I think it's a weak case, and I think Powell will challenge it.
Hurley says President Trump should worry about how markets will react if he does terminate the chair. He should also think about whether such a move would get him what he wants, because the chairman of the Fed board is only one of 12 members of the Federal Open Market Committee, which actually sets interest rates, and considers itself, Hurley says, the Fed's establishment.
If Trump were to alienate the establishment could exact its own punishment.
In other words, even if Trump succeeds in replacing Powell, he might not get the lower interest rates he wants. I'm Nancy Marshall-Genzer for Marketplace.
When a U.S. business is faced with a tariff, it has some options. Pass that cost on to consumers,
most likely
eat it, or ask suppliers if they can eat some of it too. Inflation data that's rolled in this week so far suggests the costs are starting to get passed on to consumers. Later this morning, we're going to get a not often talked about piece of economic data called the Import Price Index. It's going to reveal...
And I mean, that's what we saw with the China tariffs with the first Trump administration, was even when there was deals made between manufacturers and shipping companies, or and endpoint sellers, they, if there was a deal made, eventually the endpoint sellers raised prices because the manufacturer was done with eating that cost, and it was just agreed upon, like, hey, we'll just slowly raise our prices. So even if right now, let's say some company over in China, Vietnam, Indonesia, or Europe says, hey, we'll eat half the tariff, or we'll eat all the tariff now, there's an expectation that the endpoint seller will take that cost slowly over time because it's easier to, deal with a 20% rise in prices over 3 to 5 years than, an instant, 20% boost in cost.
Because if we're not seeing substantial declines in that, then we know, okay, if there's a 10% tariff on these goods coming from Europe, that's telling me that U.S. importers are paying more.
Which means businesses and consumers will too. I'm Justin Howe for Marketplace.
All right, let's do the numbers. Dow futures are down 60 points. That's about 0.1%. S&P 500 futures are flat. NASDAQ futures are up 0.1%.
So basically nothing. Nothing for the morning.
Marketplace morning report is supported.
We'll just wait till the next tweet or dumb
to scale with businesses.
trade announcement
for manufacturing, accounting, and more aim to provide building blocks for creating a custom software suite. Odoo, what businesses need. And by Affinity, provider of the CRM for the private capital relationship economy. Affinity knows who has the best relationship with the right startup. Affinity.co/marketplace.
Oh, sorry. Just held back a sneeze.
Whew. This week that business is stabilizing.
My face.
A slow start to the summer. But there is still a chance of turbulence. Travel is still pretty slow. Marketplace's Nova Safo has more.
Summer is usually go time for the travel industry, and yet prices are down about 3% compared to a year ago. And if you want to know why, Nora Murphy can tell you. She owns and operates 4 Airbnb listings in Jersey City.
Probably
people usually
less people
come
wanting
to
to travel.
City, not because it's so lovely, which it is, but also because it's proximity to get to Manhattan.
It's right across the river. Murphy's properties would normally be packed right now with mostly European travelers, but she's only half full.
There were guests who had already scheduled, but they are calling and canceling because they are afraid to be detained at the airport.
Yeah.
And it's not just international travelers who are pulling back.
1 in 5 Americans have planned less or plan to travel less going forward.
Jeremy Goldman is
at least
an analyst
internationally.
at eMarketer.
And more than half of Americans report that the current economic conditions, like tariffs, like rising prices, have indeed affected their travel plans for the year.
So foreign travelers and Americans, a double whammy. Economist Shannon Brine of Wells Fargo sees all of this as part of a bigger pattern, a pullback in discretionary services spending.
Things like eating out, travel, personal, professional care services, things that maybe we don't need to prioritize.
And things that are sensitive to how consumers are feeling.
They don't care that inflation's down compared to last year. They're worried about the fact that it's going to go higher and that it's still higher than what they remember pre-COVID. So when you throw tariffs on top of that, I think it's really easy to understand why consumers are more pessimistic.
And many are in a wait-and-see mode. Just ask Nora Murphy, our Airbnb host in Jersey City.
Normally at this time, my October, November, and December, those are our biggest times. Those would be all booked by now, but I do not have a single booking for those right now.
Murphy is expecting this entire year to be slow. I'm Nova Safo for Marketplace.
And I think also part of it is because there is this talk of like, hey, consumers, they worry about inflation, they worry about all this. Yes, that is true. But I think people are very in the moment. Humans are not very good at like looking into the future logically. Like we can plan things out, but we're not really good at like envisioning where we're actually going to be, more than a couple years out, even a couple months out. Things change and it's hard to really be able to predict that. But in the moment, we're really in tune to what is and what isn't happening. And right now in the moment, prices are higher than we remember. And that is causing people to be, hesitant to do fun stuff, things that really push the economy, the consumer economy that we have. Here in the United States, we are an excess consumer economy. We rely on, all the treats of modern society to keep us happy, and keep us going, and keep, other other people's occupations and their own jobs going as well. So, cool little hawk over there. So, yes, people are looking at the future and they're going, ooh, prices are going to rise. This isn't good. Let me do some short-term buys right now to try and get ahead of it. And we saw that in, I guess, February through April timeframe this year. Especially businesses were trying to buy ahead to beat the tariffs, so goods could get on American shores before Liberation Day or Liberation Day plus 90, which should be coming up soon, and all that craziness. But the everyday American, their salary is the same, or their hourly wage is the same. They're making the same amount of money, but everything is more expensive. And they feel that trend is going to go or going to continue. But right now, things are just more expensive, and it just means they have less money in their pocket to spend on, superfluous fun stuff. To go travel, do a more intense travel than, simply driving across the state and maybe seeing something, or just seeing family that's close-ish by. There's less people willing to travel outside of the United States. And then it's being compounded, at least on the travel aspect, like they were saying, with the Department of Homeland Security's just harassment of people at the border, both American citizens and foreign nationals that are trying to visit or return to the United States, or regions of business, regions of pleasure. And by pleasure, I just mean vacation. So the United States is just not a vacation spot right now. It really isn't, and it's not a place you really want to leave to go on vacation and come back if it means you're going to get harassed at whatever airport you get back at. So keep that in mind.
Sources at CDC say it's unclear how state and local public health agencies will operate. Full overdose prevention grants, IOUs don't work in the public health world, said one CDC staffer. Brian Mann, NPR News, Washington.
Gaza ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas continued in Doha this week, but many of the same sticking points
those are probably going to fail.
Unresolved. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu left Washington last week after meeting with President Trump without finalizing a truce, which Trump has been pushing for.
Remember day one? It was going to be done.
Israel and Hamas have yet to agree on how aid will be distributed in Gaza and on which hostages in Gaza and Palestinian prisoners in Israel will be released first. The two sides are also arguing over the details of Israeli troops' withdrawal. A person in Israel briefed on the issue, who is not authorized to speak to the media, said that there seems to be Israeli flexibility regarding forces withdrawing from the Morag corridor. That's a stricter band that divides the east and west of Gaza. It's key to Israel's plan to displace hundreds of thousands of Palestinians to the south of the territory. Hamas also wants assurances to end the war permanently. Israel says it wants the right to continue it after a partial ceasefire. Hadil Al-Shalchi, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
U.S. futures contracts are trading in mixed territory.
What's the point of a ceasefire with the goal of ultimate peace, or the ultimate goal of peace, if you want to reserve the right to just continue murdering Gazans, Palestinians in Gaza? It's ridiculous.
Legal proceedings against the owner are underway.
Just means they're not serious. The Israeli government is not serious about peace.
A period of mourning for the more than 60 victims. The cause of the blaze is under investigation. Rainforest in Sierra Leone and a charter of castles in Germany.
Radio is bad. All right, we might have to end it there for the day. Sorry, it's a rather short one today, but just the way it is. I don't know what it is. Just certain weeks, the radio is just worse than others, and I do think it's because of, I guess, other radio stations that aren't operating like they're supposed to be, just crowding in on other radio stations, using repeaters or illegal broadcasters, essentially. which is very annoying. And it is typically church radios in this range, since it the lower half, or really the lower third of the FM spectrum is designated for news networks and sorry, just making sure the traffic ahead of me is good. News networks, and then gospel type stuff. So it's usually gospel music or sermons for church stations that overextend their broadcast, which is very, very annoying. But just whatever. That's just a pet peeve. It just kind of is what it is here in the States, unfortunately. Especially when there is no serious care about public media, you know, the government supporting free speech and free press. It's very, very annoying. But anyways, yeah, we'll see how this NPR bill is, this defunding of NPR and PBS and child aid organizations. It's not good. I think it's going to hurt a lot of people. It's going to hurt a lot of Americans in rural areas, and even more, it's going to hurt just so many families across the world that really looked at, you know, us as Americans as saviors, and as, you know, a force of good trying to make their lives better. And now we're abandoning them, and we're just going to let people die. It's just not moral. It's just not right. So hope you all have a good Thursday. I hope the same for myself today.